Hi, my name is Jason Yunker, and in today's video, we are going to examine a worldview that attempts to explain where addiction comes from. In this worldview, the defining belief is that human life in the past was nasty, brutish, and short. It's science that lifts us out of the mud of human history. Here's Steven Pinker doing an excellent job of advocating for this very worldview. We could perhaps call it the evolutionary worldview.
Yesterday, 137,000 people escaped from extreme poverty. That could have been the headline in the New York Times every day for the last 25 years. For most of human history, life expectancy at birth hovered around 30 years. But today it is more than 70 years in the world as a whole, more than 80 years in the more fortunate developed parts of the world. 200 years ago, no more than 10% of people in the world lived above the line for extreme poverty. Today, more than 90% do. For most of human history, everyone was illiterate. Today, more than 80% of the population is literate. Fewer people are dying in wars. Fewer people are starving to death. Fewer people are dying of infectious diseases. Of course, there are problems, and many of them are horrendous. But acknowledging the world's progress is not a matter of having a sunny disposition, or wearing rose-colored glasses, or seeing the glass as half full. It's paying attention to the data, paying attention to the hard, cold, objective facts.
So what is responsible for these tremendous improvements in the human condition? According to folks like Steven Pinker, it's science and secularism that have helped move human beings out of the mud of human history into a more enlightened and prosperous place. You can hear the yearning for an enlightened view of addiction in this next video clip from Nora Volkow. She tells us the story of her grandfather's suicide.
I've devoted all of my life to study the effects of drugs in the human brain, to try to understand what is it that they do to our brains that in some people that are vulnerable can lead them to the complete loss of control with severe catastrophic consequences. But before I actually go into that, I want to share a personal story. As Dr. Sommergaard mentioned, I was born in Mexico City. And many years ago, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I remember having dinner in my family with my parents and my 3 sisters. And there was a man that came to deliver a telegraph to my mother. I remember my mother crying after she read the telegraph. And I had never seen my mother cry, and I wanted to console her. But she did not want us to see her cry, and she left the room and locked the door behind her. Next morning, my father will tell us that the father of my mother had died. And it was many years later, when I had already been working for many years using brain imaging to investigate what drugs do to our brains, how we become addicted. At the time when my mother was dying of cancer, and she called me and said, "Nora, I need to tell you something I never spoken to you about." And she told me that my grandfather, her father, had been an alcoholic, and that in utter distress of not being able to control the strong urges to drink alcohol, he had killed himself. And I was taken aback by this, because I never knew my grandfather was an alcoholic. But I was also taken aback by the fact that my mother had kept a secret from me, even though she knew that my professional life was devoted to try to understand what drugs do to the brain. So I wonder, how could I have not make her realize that it was okay to speak about addiction?
I applaud Nora Volkow and all of her colleagues because I do think that science has helped us reduce the taboo and stigma associated with addiction. However, I am not ready to throw out Christianity with the bathwater just yet. I think Christianity has some great resources to help anyone who's struggling, feeling depressed and despondent over their substance use. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. What this is saying is that Jesus knows our temptations, and he empathizes. He gets why we would give in. Jesus is not this divine and detached figure. He became human. He suffered. He died a human death. Based on his empathy, we are told to go boldly, not just when we've had a minor mishap, but when we need it most. You know, the military, after a failed mission, will do an after-action review. To prevent future problems, they'll take an honest look at what was supposed to happen and what actually did happen. Hospitals and mental health clinics do something similar as well. The only way these can be really successful is if the person who screwed up feels safe enough to say what went wrong. If it's just a vehicle for finding blame, no one will participate honestly. So having a boss or investigator that has done your job is helpful. That boss or investigator will understand how hard the job is and empathize with human error. Jesus is that boss. You can tell him exactly what you did wrong, and he will go to the court hearing so you don't have to. He will face Congress's angry questions. The scandalous news story will be about him. The mob of angry protesters demanding justice will be chanting for his crucifixion, not yours. In Jesus, maybe you did contribute in some way to the alcoholism, but you don't have to despair. Romans 8:1 tells us, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus."